May 15, 2010. Held at the Governor's Mansion in Carson City, a day to honor Jane Ford.
Okay, so we're interviewing Jean's daughter and granddaughter, and I guess my question would be, what allowed her, what qualities allowed her to get done what she got done, because she got so much done?
I think probably the biggest or most important quality that she was very organized. And she could just juggle so many different things at once and still really be on top of it all. And so I just remember her having a lot of different projects going on at the same time. She'd have the Red Rock Canyon project going on, and to make it a park, and then League of Women Voters and the library system and everything. And she had a huge office at home, a home office, with just tons of files, but they were all really organized. Completely different from my desk.
So what was it like to be the daughter of somebody who was on the go all the time like that?
Well, it's hard to wrap your mind around it when you're a kid. So you don't really realize the impact that your mom's having on all these different arenas and areas. But I don't know, it was kind of a whirlwind, actually. There was just always meetings at our house, or she was always off to a meeting, but we did a lot outdoors, and she took us on a lot of trips, hiking, and it was camping and a lot. She loved the wilderness, so we used to go out a lot into Nevada, and it was fun.
I guess the question is, how did it set the bar for you growing up with a mom like that?
I haven't really attempted what she did in her life. I've just been into other things, so I haven't really gotten that socially involved. But I would say that she taught me that you could do anything, you really could do anything if you put your mind to it. And that, she was a feminist before it was, popular to be a feminist, and just pretty much taught you that, even though you're a girl or a woman, the world is yours, go for it. So it was a great thing.
That's great, thank you. And what about you to have a grandmother like that?
It was really cool. Like, my friends say, oh, wasn't your grandma Jean Ford? I was like, yeah. And it's just cool. Yeah. She was sick.
Yeah, she was sick. She was already sick.
Yeah, I started remembering.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to say about your grandmother?
I think it's cool how she did so much for Nevada, and we always go up to Red Rock Canyon. We go sometimes to her memorial there. And it's just cool to think, well, it's such a beautiful place, and she kind of created it in a way.
Will help, yeah.
Was that your favorite project of hers?
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's really cool that when I go to Red Rock, that just wow, she created, she helped create it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It must make you feel really proud.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Do you have
good.
brothers and sisters?
Yeah.
Are you the only?
No, I have one other daughter who's older, a little bit older.
I was thinking you.
Oh, me? Yeah, I do. I have one sister, and she lives back east.
So it was kind of the two of you traveling around with your mother?
Yeah, we would all go on camping trips, the whole family, the four of us, my mom and my dad and us, and she would just take us all over the state. Or sometimes I would go happily, and then sometimes I would go not so happily, but I'm really glad now that I went on all those trips.
Did you do a lot of addressing envelopes and putting on stamps?
Oh, I did. I helped a lot with the campaign work and all of that. I remember going out with my dad and putting campaign signs around town, and yeah, it was really fun.
So there was a lot of hard work involved.
Oh, there was, but it was all good. I mean, that was fine. It was fine.
They can just tell us their name. This is just.
You did. It's down here.
Can you show us your outfit?
I want people to trip on it. It's like a door's
Yes.
So yeah, what do you think? Which of the traits do you want to pull out, and how are you impacted?
That's all right.
I think that basically the work she did in highlighting the important role of women in the history of our state, that and the fact that there would be no Las Vegas Clark County Library District if it hadn't been for Jean. She was an incredible role model and someone for whom I have enormous respect.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know what drives someone, but I think Jean was one of these people who just understood that the role of women was so terribly important, and that in this state in particular, where we have, how do I put it gently, I won't, a lot of male chauvinists, women were relegated to the back of the bus when actually they were driving the bus. And I think that and her understanding of the important role that libraries play in a community, in economic development, in education, and in lifelong learning. And she understood these, and she had the character and the force of will to make things happen.
So Jean worked with a lot of different people on a lot of different things, a lot of different causes. What did you work with her on, and what did she draw out of you?
Well, when she had her tour company, Nevada Discovery Tours, I went on several trips, or parts of several trips, and was a tour guide for things that she didn't necessarily know enough about to be the tour guide. And she brought a higher quality and more precision to what I did because she demanded perfection. And she was perfect in the way she did those tours, but she would draw that out of her tour guides as well. So I've learned how to be a better tour guide because of Jean.
You know what I'm going for?
Yes. There are times when I'm doing tours and things happen that make me think, how would Jean have handled this situation? And I think a little bit more deeply about what I tell people when we're in that situation than I would normally have done.
Certainly comment about that.
Okay, if you want to
Okay.
go ahead and just talk to Tammy right here.
Okay, well, I would like to also remember Jean because I didn't serve with her, but she made such an impact for women. And, you know, I think back when I got to Congress and she led the way for me. There were 19 women in the House of Representatives when I was elected out of 435 people. So if it hadn't been for Jean, I never would have had the nerve to even run, let alone win. And of course, I was the first woman Republican, and I served in the leadership. But again, Jean broke the way for so many women, and when I look back, I don't think anybody recognized what a wonderful comment it was, and what a thing and I know how disappointed she was when the ERA lost in the state. So, and it's still the same way. But anyway, women have come a long way, and it's their thanks for Jean. Oh, wonderful.
About Jean being a role model.
Well, Jean was a role model for very many women, and many women. Politician in our state, and she was for me. I had never run for office before, and when I got to Congress, there were 19 women out of 435 members. And I don't think I would have even had the nerve to do this if it hadn't been for the leadership of Jean. It was wonderful. Is that right?
Okay, how did she impact you?
Well, Jean and I co-conducted a number of tours around Nevada. And one of the things that impressed me was her extraordinary, detailed knowledge of Nevada history, lore, geography, clear down to the belly flowers on the desert floor.
I love that picture, Jean.
That's great. Okay.
Interesting. Program?
Shortly.
Okay. Are we going?
Yeah.
Oh. On a daily basis, Jean comes in a number of ways. Number one, her careful attention to what people are saying. And it's hard to model that, but she was a model for listening. And then when she'd gathered all the information, she had a lot of things to say and to offer.
This is Grace's. Yeah.
That grace appeared, the hour I first believed. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see.
No, the work goes on, and I thank you for that. While you are celebrating, I'll be watching my daughter Sarah graduate from Davidson College. She's headed to the Philippines for 5 years to serve with Innovations for Poverty Action. And that is not the kind of opportunity women had in the past, and it's a sign of how far we have come. Enjoy the day. Fondly, Carla Oberst. So it was very nice to hear from Carla because we haven't seen her for a long time either. Today we have a special honor. We have with us a gentleman named William Walker, and he's back there. And Mr. Walker is a very, very talented artist. And he has painted a picture for us of Sarah Winnemucca. And as most of you know, we were instrumental in placing a statue of Sarah Winnemucca in the United States Capitol building at Statuary Hall. Also one here at our own Capitol, and then one in Las Vegas at, and I can never remember, of course, the Sawyer Building in Las Vegas. So, Mr. William Walker, would you come up, please? And I believe Helen is going to receive the picture. Mr. Walker?
He can hear us.
I'm obviously very pleased that that painting is in this building, and I wish to thank the Nevada Women's History Project for their help in getting it here. And I'm sure that Chief Winnemucca would be enormously pleased if he could know about this, because she truly was Nevada's princess.
And here is Helen.
She brought it over for me just to look at. And the governor looked at it, and the first lady the next day came by and she looked at it. And it's really an honor to have her hanging in our mansion.
Thank you, and we're very grateful to Mr. Walker. Sir, thank you so much. All right, as you know, our organization was founded in 1994 by Jean Ford. It was later became a part of the Nevada Women's Fund in 1996. But Jean had a very long, eventful, and productive life before she came to us. And so today we're going to recognize all aspects of Jean's life, not just the part that so endeared her to us and made her a part of our lives. We're going to talk first about her life as an activist. And Joan Tinker, there's Joan. I can't think of you as Joan Tinker. Joan Kirchner is, would you come up please and talk about Jean's life as an activist?
Can I stand down, Gwen? Because to say, you think you'll just go on and on. So I want to have my notes here so I just don't get carried away, because there's always so much. What an activist she was in so many areas. And I just happened to be in a profession that she was an activist in, and so maybe I'll tell you a little bit about my experiences with Jean, and you'll remember the stories of what your experiences were like as well. You already know, of course, that she started the Las Vegas Clark County Library District, which is part of the notes here, and many things with the Parks Department and that kind of thing. When I came here in 1973 to the Nevada State Library, which was when Martha came, and there wasn't even the Nevada State Library and Archives, let alone the Department of Cultural Affairs yet, it was the beginning of a legislative session, February of 1973. And everybody in the whole world, in the library world, was just a twitter that Jean Ford was going to be in the legislature. I had no idea why, because I didn't know her long history with the Las Vegas Library. And I actually thought it was because we had a connection, because her brother-in-law, Oscar Ford, was in our department. So I thought, well, everybody's excited because we have a connection in the library. But I pretty soon found that she had a connection with us, and she was going to drive the train, and she was going to make sure that we had projects that she could accomplish in the legislature. I found that out very quickly because we started having meetings as soon as she hit town, and she said, what are we going to do for libraries? What can we accomplish? Let's make a plan. So we made a plan to develop a statistical abstract and a biennial report for the state of Nevada for the first time. And we worked very, very hard on it, and it didn't pass. But that was my big introduction to lobbying, which I did for the next 30 years, and doing legislative activities for libraries and museums and arts councils and all those kinds of things. And I remember that the first time that I had to walk on the floor to see Jean, I realized I was wearing, you define the times sort of by what you were wearing, like you ladies are doing today. I was wearing some wild bell-bottoms with big cabbage roses on them. And, you know, I was just, and Jean had called and said, can you come down to my desk? And I want to give you some information. And as I walked across that room and I saw the elegant, regal Jean Ford in one of her beautiful scarves and beautifully coiffed, I felt like this silly child. What was I doing there? And in that very moment, I just thought, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be just like Jean Ford. And I don't think that ever changed. She always was our mentor because of her first experiences with starting the library district. If you read her autobiography, you probably know she said that she was with the started the League of Women Voters, and they didn't have a library in Clark County, and I can guarantee you that they had a little library in Las Vegas, which was then under the freeway, and it was just worse than anything you can imagine today for a library. But they paid no taxes in the county, and they had no library service. And so she got the League of Women Voters together, and they decided that they should develop a system for libraries in Clark County. And make a very long story short, she got that accomplished, and that's now one of the largest library systems in the United States, has had so many accolades for the beautiful architecture, for the dozens of buildings that they've built, has over a $50 million budget, and it was the starting point for big things for Las Vegas. So, as I said, we didn't get the bill passed, and in fact, that was a very tough time for Jean after the first session. Here I thought that I had met this person that could move mountains, and I think she maybe felt she could too, but the truth is not one of her bills passed that first session. And that's because the good old boy types had sort of put her in a box and said, we're not going to let this uppity woman tell us what we can pass and we can't pass. And I remember that at the end of that session, she called me and she was very tearful, and she said, I'm not going to run again because I can't get anything done. I just can't get anything done. Well, luckily she reconsidered that, as you all know, and began to get everything done after that point. And it just shows you that you can't, she had the determination, even though she had some down times and discouraging times, to keep going and getting a lot done for all of us through the years. She never stopped working for libraries. In fact, she was the chairman of the Governor's Commission on Libraries, which White House Conference on Libraries, actually. Every 10 years we had those, and for 2 of those times she was the chairperson and the person that took us to Washington and got many national things done for libraries, funding, etc., that also came back to Nevada. Let's see. I'm just going to skip ahead till near the end of Jean's days. A couple of days before the end, she called me, and I know many of you can relate to this, she had a few last-minute assignments for me. She wanted to make sure that I remembered them all and that I had them in my schedule. One of them was to write her on Jim Hulse's book, so we could get the book on Nevada and library culture done. One was to see through the development of the Jean Ford room in the Clark County Library, where all of us could see all of the documentation that she had from both the League of Women Voters and the Library Development Days. But what was really interesting was that night she had just received Anita Watson's hot-off-the-press manuscript about women's history, and she wanted me to read that to her that night. Now, sometimes I've wondered what I'd be doing if I knew I had a few days to live. I truly don't know, but I can guarantee you, all due respect to Anita Watson, it wouldn't have been reading her manuscript about the women's history. So Jean was working till the very end on the things that she loved, and she was really a true Western can-do woman who actually went with her boots on, and that's exactly why we all love her and why we remember her today. And I know each one of you have stories that you could tell just like this and could go on and on. See why I have the notes. Cut yourself off now, Joan, because there's so many wonderful Jean Ford stories of the things that she's done throughout the state. And I hope you will all share them with each other today, even though you can't get up, we can't all get up and talk about them like I had the privilege of doing. Thank you.
Who will discuss Jean Ford as a legislator. Who is Jean Ford as a...
Is that microphone is that gonna be okay? I mean, she's narrowly, I don't stand behind a podium. So can I, and I'm gonna have to put on my glasses to read my notes. And then I'm going to put on Jean's glasses, which are quite different from mine. Before I became Jean, how many of you knew Jean? Did anybody not know Jean? I did not know her. One person didn't know her? 3 or 4 people. Okay, all right, a few people didn't know her. Well, I served with Jean in the legislature in 1981. I was in the Assembly, and she was in the Senate. And if you know anything about houses of legislatures, you never see the other people or talk to the other people or even interact with the other people. So I have no distinct memories of Jean from that session, but I do have distinct memories of Jean because I met her before that. Probably because of our Republican Party connections, although she was never really active in the Republican Party. The thing that I liked about Jean Ford was she supported all women. It didn't matter what you believed. It wasn't an issue with her. She was for all women. Unlike many women's organizations that support conservative women or liberal women, and there's no room for the other side. Jean had room in her heart, in her organization, like the Nevada Women's History Project, for everybody. And I really appreciated that. The first time I remember Jean is from the International Women's Year Conference in 1977. And Chris Crystal was there and other people. But the amazing thing was, Jean asked me to carry the Washoe County flag. And you have to understand, this was in the height of all the debates about ERA and women's rights and all of that. Jean included everybody. She even had Janine Hansen. Can you believe that? She did. She had the LDS choir singing one of the events. Jean supported women. And so, the Nevada Women's History Project, which she started, continues that philosophy, and I think it's a very good one. My portrayal of Jean today is really taken from her oral history. I read all 175 pages about her legislative experience. And she only talked about a few bills. She talked in generalities about things that she supported, most of which you all know about. And so I'm going to talk about those general areas of interest. And then I'm going to talk about really what it's like to be a woman in the legislature, particularly back in those days. But you all know she was big for libraries. She was big for parks. She was big for equality for women. She was especially known for legislative reform and open government. Nobody else wanted it when she was there, but her activities were not limited to Nevada. She attended all these national meetings that Joan talked about. In every organization and interest that she had, she was involved in a national group. She went and learned what they were doing. She brought it back to Nevada and applied it here. The other thing, I'm sure you all know, she was constantly learning. She was always a student. She loved to write reports. She loved to write up her activities. She told everybody what she was doing. And quite frankly, if you've ever met any of the legislators, probably not exactly what they did. As somebody once said to me, Bob Arenga once said to me, you wouldn't have half these people to your house for dinner. That was his take on them. But anyway, she was very big on learning. And because it's a part-time job, she didn't have a job. She was a housewife. So she had time to devote to some of these activities, which men, of course, did not. So when I step into Jean's character, I will be telling you about her experiences as a legislator and how women were treated there. Many of the same experiences I had. Not all of them, but some of them. So let me put on my Jean glasses to go with my Jean hair. And we'll see what we can do. Hi, I'm Jean Ford. I'd like to tell you about my legislative career. I was first elected to the Nevada Assembly in 1972. I was a Republican. We were in the minority. There were 3 other women there, and they were all Democrats. I rented a room in the Ormsby House because I came from Las Vegas, and I had to come up and spend the session time there. We didn't have an office. We worked at our desks. That's in the open floor of the assembly. That's where you did all your work, your research, met with constituents. And I do remember this. I was so frightened to speak, pick up that microphone, and talk. I took Valium to overcome my fear. For a while before I was able to get up and speak. And you know what? Now I love to speak in public. That session, I served on government affairs, which are all about government operations, elections, and environment. I introduced some bills. Most of them didn't get passed. Registration of lobbyists. Some of these, really, eventually she got them on. Ethics bills, those didn't pass. My lobbyist bill did pass in 1975. ERA was big. It passed Congress in 1972. Big, big issue. And those guys played these games. Go over to introduced in the Senate, and it got passed. They'd send it over to the Assembly, and it got killed. The next session, they introduced it in the Assembly, and they killed it in the Senate. That's how they did it. And some of those guys took money from both sides, figuring it wasn't coming to their house. And when it did, they had a political problem. When I tried to move up to the Senate in 1976, it became one of the issues that I lost on. Wasn't all of it, but part of it. It was really because of my involvement and leadership role that I took on that issue. When it became an advisory question on the ballot in 1978, it was voted down 4-1. End of that discussion. My loss for the Senate was also attributed to my lack of support from the Republicans. Some of those leaders, those men, would rather have had no one than me. I was perceived to be a radical feminist. I noticed that votes really didn't come down to Republican and Democrat. They came down to some other splits, liberal versus conservative, and both parties have them, so it wasn't partisan usually. North versus South, Clark versus Washoe, Washoe and Clark versus the rurals, all the geographic debates. Party caucuses really didn't play much of a role except when you were voting for leadership. The big split, old-timers versus new-timers. I was a new-timer, and the old-timers didn't like change. There was a national movement going on in those days about legislative reform. And of course, I joined that movement because it was right what I was looking for. The old-timers really resented any change in the system. They liked the way it was working. My first term, I introduced about 15 bills. Most of them were killed, like open meeting law, open meeting of legislative committees, registration of lobbyists, legislators declaring their conflict of interest, ERA. I did succeed in a few bills, giving physical assistance to the disabled when they came to vote. I also got passed an assembly resolution, not Senate, assembly, on rules for the House, creating such things as keeping minutes at committee meetings. And a frightening concept. We had a vice chairman on the committees. We actually had public hearings. So the public finally got a chance to see what was going on at the legislature. But I learned I couldn't influence legislation when I wasn't on that committee. That session, we considered about 450 bills in 102 days. In between sessions, and again, I was a housewife, I had time to serve on a lot of interim committees and go to these national meetings. I was the vice chairman of the Study of Legislative Operations and Procedures Committee, and we reported out about 38 recommendations, most of which passed. Something like parallel hearings for committees, like Judiciary would meet the same days, same times in both the Assembly and Senate. So if a citizen wanted to come, they didn't have to make 2 or 3 trips to Carson City. They could come for one. We actually adopted standing rules to operate under. We adopted or ultimately passed disclosures of lobbyists' expenses. Lobbyist registration, finally got that on. Disclosure of campaign finances. Now remember, this isn't all that long ago. This is in the 1970s. We also passed something called legislators' personal finance, disclosure of personal finances for legislators and their relations, business relationships, and an ethics commission. In 1975, we even went to electronic voting. We no longer did roll call votes on every bill of the A's and A's. We actually pushed the button. We had pre-printing of bills, a new concept, that they weren't printing them once you got there. We also allowed our financial staff to work with the governor's staff on preparing the budget. Another new concept. It used to be just loggerheads. Of course, it's not like that now, is it? But in 1975, I was also probably publicly humiliated in the worst fashion ever when I was there. And it was by my colleagues, and some of them were my friends. I had studied how little time legislators spent actually legislating. And I got up and I reported it on the floor. Well, one legislator got up and said, "We have better things to do than listen to you come up with this kind of information." A real slap. I went back to my room and cried for 2 days. That session, I served on government affairs, taxation, and health and welfare. ERA was still big by then. But we had 45 bills that we introduced. While we didn't win the ERA battle, we did win repealing most of the discriminatory laws in Nevada against women. About 25, I think. One was women couldn't be a bartender unless you owned the bar partially. Women couldn't be firefighters. That's a biggie. Repealed that. Equal pay bill. The law said you could hire a woman below minimum wage as a probationary employee for 90 days. So what did employers do? They hired the women, and they fired him before the 90 days was up, and they hired a new woman and started through it all again. So we got that fixed. Another discriminatory law was women couldn't work for more than 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day. Well, you know, that eliminated a lot of jobs that women could do. So we were the last state in the Union to repeal this kind of law. But I realized early on that I had to compromise to get things done if I wanted people to vote for my legislation. So we exempted any business with less than 15 employees when we passed that. My reformer mode was resented by the senior members, read men. One bill, I think it was a libraries bill, I got out of the Assembly, went over to the Senate, and Senator Floyd Lamb killed it because I had killed one of his park bills. So that was the payback. That's how it works. In 1976, I lost the Republican primary for the state Senate. I was moving up, but it was a totally different kind of campaign. You know, you couldn't go door to door like you can in an assembly district. You know, 90,000 doors, can't do it. You have to go on television. You go to parties, events, businesses, shake hands, that sort of thing. I wasn't supported by the Republicans, but my supporters didn't think I needed any help because they knew I was going to win. So they didn't help me. And everybody was a little shocked when I didn't win. There were 4 seats for the Senate at the time, and I came in 5th. I did cry for 2 days. And it's pretty daunting to have a position, be an important person, sort of be famous, and now you're nothing. It's pretty devastating. And she'd been doing, Jean, had been doing this for quite a while. And now I had no platform. I had no position, nothing. So I went on and did some other things, went to work at the library and so forth. In 1978, the Democrat women urged me to run for the Senate again. And I had a lot of Democrat endorsements. But the Clark County chairman of the Democrat Party, a woman, was so mad about all my Democrat endorsements that she was going to pass a resolution at their Central Committee to kick these people off the Central Committee for endorsing me. And so somebody in the press came by and said, well, what do you think of that? And I said, I'll show her. And she went down, and I went down and changed my party registration to Democrat. And, you know, it's something I'd been thinking about for a long time, but I had friends in both parties. I liked the Republican individualism, self-reliance, but the Democrats had a more modern approach to government that seemed to fit with me. And quite frankly, both parties in Nevada are quite weak. So that year, when I ran for the Senate, I did all the things that you do to step up to a higher level, and that was I opened headquarters, I raised money, teachers, public employees, labor, hotels. I raised $74,000, and I thought I needed about $50,000. I got professional help on my television, which I hadn't done the last time. And I wore a black dress, with white polka dots, and a red flower on my lapel. Those were my campaign colors. And I sort of wore them through all my events so that people could identify with me. I was the top vote getter that year in the Democrat primary. When I got to the Senate in 1979, I was the only woman. I was in the majority party. This is a whole different thing than being in the minority party in the Assembly. I became the vice chairman of government affairs, and I was really much more comfortable with the system because I knew how it all worked. I was appointed to be the chairman of the subcommittee to consolidate the police department in Clark County, and that was a big, big issue. In 1981, I served on the Judiciary, Government Affairs, and Legislative Function committees. And those are all major, major committees, spent a lot of time, very busy. The issues we dealt with were reapportionment, Sagebrush Rebellion. Dean Rhodes wanted to take over all the public lands in Nevada, and I thought that was a bad idea, so I voted against it. Nuclear waste came up, storage of nuclear waste, and I voted no. All the people who voted for it thought it was a great idea because we're going to get so many jobs. I just didn't think it was a good idea. I might mention how I dressed. I love clothes. In the assembly, I sort of dressed what I would call sort of flirty, sort of to get the guys' attention, to notice me. By the time I got to the Senate, I realized I didn't want them looking at me. I wanted them to listen to me. And so I went to blazers, pleated skirts, conservative blouses, and I really didn't want them to notice me. I wanted them to pay attention to me. But the Senate was still very much a male place. Sue Wagner by then was also in the other woman in the Senate. I even gave a workshop on the politics of dress, and I bet it didn't include cabbage roses.
Or miniskirts. I showed up in one once when I had to testify at a...
That was not a good idea. Yes, right. Not a good idea. At that session, unfortunately, I crossed Hank Greenspun. Not a good idea. He was the owner of the Las Vegas Sun, and I voted against some test site vote. And I voted no, and it was something he really wanted. Well, he called me, and I didn't return his call. Not a good idea, ever. So he blasted me in his newspaper, and of course, I responded. And of course, then he blasted me again, because he had another opportunity. So it became very difficult when you've got some of the press against you. Anyway, I needed a job. I had been the community relations person for the Clark County Library, but then I was being accused of a conflict of interest because I was promoting library projects, like 18 libraries or something. And so I was getting beat up in the press over that. And it's like, we have a citizen legislature, every person down there has a conflict of interest, but they were picking on me. So I resigned my library job, but after the 81 session, I really needed a job. I needed to make some money, so I chose not to run. And I created my own company. I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about my legislative career. And in looking back, I'd say, I think my legacy was legislative reform and open government and repeal of many of the discriminatory laws against women in Nevada. Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce Kay Sanders, who's going to tell us a little bit about Jean as a commissioner.
She was just a remarkable person. I will talk louder then. I'm suffering from allergies, so I'll do the best I can. I met Jean first when I worked at the University of Nevada in Reno, and she was the acting director of the Women's Studies Department at that time. So I was in an independent study department. I was the chair, and she developed some courses for us and was a very valuable faculty member. And she attended my retirement party in 1995. And I have a picture of her signing this poster they had of me, and I could just see the wheels turning as I looked back, because by the next February of 1996, I was signed up as a member of the Women's History Project, and here it is 14 years later. I'm still very involved. So she picked the right one. She knew I needed something to do after retirement. But she was the type of person who could figure out what a person could do best, what their strengths were. And she really encouraged people with their strengths, and she tended to ignore their weaknesses. And that's such a valuable characteristic of somebody who is in a leadership position. So she got a very good team together for the Nevada Women's History Project, and we're still at it. The work that I am going to concentrate on is after she had decided not to run in 1982. She'd already been a two-time assemblywoman and one term in the Senate. And she took a job working with Richard Bryan as a consultant. She had formed her company, Jean Ford Company. And she was a paid consultant for his 1982 run for governor. And they had a lot in common. They both felt that the state needed to take the leadership in promoting tourism and economic development. The budget for both of those areas in our state had been very meager, to say the least. I think she said it was behind some foreign country that wasn't even interested in that area. So people had started listening to the idea that the state ought to take a role in helping government to diversify the economy and consequently do a tremendous increase in promoting and marketing tourism. Richard Bryan won that election. He took office in 1983. And by then, Jean's tourism business, and she also had a consulting firm, of course, and it wasn't making the amount of income that she needed to keep going as a full-time private business owner. So she took an appointment to the first Nevada State Tourism Commission, and that was in 1983. And I looked at her oral history just to find out how many commissions she had actually worked on and what they did. And according to her remembrances about this first tourism commission, it was represented mainly by casino industry people, and she said that she and Bill Thornton, who was a Reno businessman, also owned a casino, but they were representing the little people, not the big business. And the Nevada Lieutenant Governor at that time was automatically the chair of the Tourism Commission and the Economic Development Commission. And she felt, and according to her oral history, that he had a decided lack of interest in both of these commissions. So, in order to get the leadership that they needed, the commission members decided to hire a director of tourism and 2 staff members, and they really went to town. And they were the ones, this first commission on tourism, were the ones who divided the state into these different areas, and I'm sure you've all remembered from maps of Nevada that we are indeed broken into segments, Reno, Tahoe, and it included Carson City and Virginia City. Las Vegas, Cowboy Country, which was the eastern side, Elko County, Pony Express, which was going through the central part, probably Highway 50, Nevada Silver Trails, and Indian Territory. So she really covered all the different areas of Nevada that could be developed and marketed to encourage tourism. They consistently pushed for rural Nevada. During this time in our economy, it was kind of sluggish, and so particularly the rural areas were hard hit. And they traveled a lot. And they really pushed to have the rural areas develop their own historic attractions, including museums and historic buildings, scenic areas, historic areas, and also community events. There's a lot of small town community events, one of which has just been a consistent winner, which was the Cowboy Poetry event in Elko, and that's gone to attract international tourists. Even in today's recession, I think they still are doing very well with that. Also, programs were developed to apply for money for rural areas to attract tourists and develop a good product once the tourists arrived. So by the spring of 1985, Jean decided to work for Richard Ryan full-time and leave her consulting firm and tour company, the Nevada Discovery Tours. And she took this appointment as Director of Office of Community Services. And this is a position she was the chair of and director of from October 1985 to March 1985. And this office managed and administered several programs in Nevada that were funded by the federal government, and including federal block grants, the Department of Energy grants, HUD, Housing, Urban Development, lots of other areas, and this involved, of course, a lot of travel. Well, she was then criticized by many for traveling too much. So you can't win for losing. She did her job and still was criticized. And another area that I was asked to comment on was her role in parks here in our state. And this goes back to before she even was a legislator. She was appointed by Governor Paul Laxalt to the Nevada State Park Commission, and this was in 1967. And on this commission, she lobbied for state park increases, organized public support for a successful $5 million bond issue, and that won in the 1970 ballot. She served in the state legislature, of course, as we just heard. And during that time, she was still working on bills that would help promote open space and parks. So I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the victories. She was instrumental in getting scenic areas protected, and one of them was the law that passed to restrict and also, in many cases, have it not allowed at all, which was the removal of flora and endangered species. And one of my friends who was raised in Hawthorne was very worried about the lizards of all things. And Nevada has a large number of a lot of different species in different areas of lizarddom. And so she was very helpful in getting lizards protected because collectors were coming from all over the country and gathering up our precious lizards and selling them. So, anyway, she also introduced a bill for appropriation for a state park office in southern Nevada. And even though this didn't pass, approval was given to use existing funds to open an office in the Valley of Fire State Park. I don't know if many of you have been down there, but it's just a beautiful area in southern Nevada. So thankfully she got in early and was able to protect it from being developed. Another bill that she co-sponsored while being a legislator was that every developer contributes something towards open space and neighborhood parks when they filed and got permission to build. And so thankfully for that, and I think that where I live in Northwest Reno is a good example. There's parks and trails, and I think that this bill probably got that started. Another victory was aimed at protecting the Red Rock Canyonlands in southern Nevada. And they became one big state park. And of course this involved agreements between the BLM, since Nevada is mostly federally owned. And she had that wonderful ability to bring in all sides and get them to agree on something positive. So the state then and the BLM manages these lands together as one park. Spring Mountain State Park is another win for some of her legislation. That was created when she was in the legislature. And going back to her earlier years, prior to becoming a legislator, she researched with the League of Women Voters. And one thing that they researched was the status of parks in Clark County. And they also researched Nevada state parks and published the current review of state parks. And this threw a spotlight, not surprisingly, on the abysmal funding that at that time was given to keep up the state parks and to manage them. And so then this League of Women Voters, they were a very activist group, they lobbied for money, for changes in the law, and for coordination with the BLM and the Fish and Wildlife Department. And then during Grant Sawyer's tenure, so she was appointed to commissions by 3 different governors. In 1964, she was appointed to the Nevada Outdoor Recreation Coordinating Committee, and that's a mouthful. And this was funded by the Nevada Land and Water Conservation Fund passed by Congress, and is responsible for Jean being selected to this committee because one of the criteria for getting money out of this this fund was that there be a coordinating committee. And so their first meeting was in Elko, and this was again in 1964. Jean hadn't been in Nevada very long by then. And she was thrilled by a flight that she took up from Las Vegas up to Elko in the fall, early October, and they had it was a state plane, and it was required that they fly rather low, and it was at 7,000 feet. Well, if anyone's familiar with the valleys and mountains in Nevada, most of the mountains are higher than 7,000 feet. So they flew through the valleys. And she said it was just stunning to see this beautiful Nevada territory with the golden quaking aspens in full color. And she just fell in love. That was her first time up to the northern part of Nevada. She just fell in love with our state. And so she also was instrumental in creating Friends of Nevada Wilderness, and this was a little bit later in 1984. She got that going, and it still is. It's 25 years plus a little that it's still going, and they work hard to protect our wilderness areas. She had to give up her executive director position with that group when she was appointed to the director of Office of Community Services by Governor Bryan. And I just wanted to close this by saying that her passion and her love for our state was infectious. We all just caught it from her. You didn't need to go on more than one trip with Jean, and her enthusiasm just bubbled over. And I took the class at the university that she gave. It was the common name of the wildflower. She collected them, pressed them, and had them in an orderly file. So you didn't want to argue with her about it, the name of a wildflower, because she knew it. And anyway, that's about it. I just feel so lucky to have met her, and it was a good time of my life because I had just retired, and I think that she just knew that I was a good person to grab onto and get me going here as a volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. And I might add, Kate is still in charge of biographies for the Nevada Women's History Project. In early 1994, Justice Deborah Auguste, who was one of our Washoe County District Court judges, invited me to a brown bag lunch at her in her courtroom. And we all went and we met this woman named Jean Ford, who immediately handed out little quizzes to see what we really knew about Nevada women's history. And of course, the way it always worked, we realized how little we actually knew. And I met Jean that day, and we, exchanged particulars. And Jean was the kind of woman that there was never a problem that she identified with that she didn't automatically think she could fix. I mean, it just never occurred to her that she couldn't fix it. And when she first started teaching up at the university, she assigned her students to do research projects, as you heard from Lisa Marie and Kay and several other people. And she was just dismayed that they really couldn't find any information. And the reason they couldn't find any information was because it wasn't there. So Jean decided this was a problem that she was going to fix. So about 2 or 3 days after this lunch at Judge Auguste's courtroom, I received a telephone call. And she said, this is Jean Ford. And I'm starting an organization, and I need bylaws. And I said, oh, I don't know anything about bylaws. And she said, well, you're an attorney, aren't you? And I said, yes, but I am a family court master. I don't deal with things like bylaws. I deal with child custody and things like that. She said, oh, it won't be a problem for you. And I said, all right. And she said, you just call Nebraska. I have just found out that Nebraska has a Nebraska Women's History Project, and they have wonderful bylaws, and I want to copy them. So, within that week, I got on the phone and I called Nebraska. And sure enough, they had bylaws. So they put them in an envelope and sent them to me, and that took about a week. So Jean called back and she said, do you have the bylaws? I said, yes, I do. I have the Nebraska bylaws. She said, fine, what are you doing this Saturday? I said, well, I don't know. Why? And she said, do you have a computer? And I said, yes. She said, fine, I'll be at your house at 8 in the morning. And I said, okay. So she showed up at 8 in the morning, and she and I developed those hated bylaws that you all have lived with for many, many years. And my husband, about lunchtime, came in and said, where is she? And so he said, does she ever eat? I said, yes. And so he fixed us lunch. And we took a break and had lunch. And about 7 o'clock that evening, he came back in the room and he said, I fixed dinner. And Jean said, oh, thank you. We can take a break now. At about 10 o'clock that night, those bylaws were finished. And that was in 1994, and the Nevada Women's History Project was commenced. 2 years later, she joined with Fritzie Erickson, who was at that time CEO of the Nevada Women's Fund. And Nevada Women's Fund had their own bylaws, thank God. And we, as an adjunct organization of the Nevada Women's Fund, used their bylaws. Then we had to do policies and procedures. So we got those done. Anyway, that was the beginning of the Nevada Women's History Project. As you all know, we have had lots and lots of fun over these years, done some pretty fantastic things, I think, for women's history. We're still enjoying ourselves. This is the 10th annual Pink Tea, and hopefully we'll all be around for many, many more, and so will the Nevada Women's History Project, because this group was very near and dear to Jean's heart. Now, to finish up our program, we have two special people who will repeat a program that they have done over the years for us, Wally Kuchin and Sally Wilkins. And Wally assures me that this is not the same program, that they have rewritten it, or Sally has.
All right. 13 years ago, Wally and I created a very funny skit for Jean's Assembly Chamber party in October of '97. Wally played Jean with a silver wig, not quite as nice as Patty's, but a silver wig and a blue jacket, which read Nevada Discovery Tours, which was the name of our company earlier. Well, we were asked to recreate this same skit, which was an honor to both of us. And as we thought about Jean's life and how technology has changed in 13 years, we gave our skit just a bit of a twist.
Can you hear me now?
We decided to do her Redux Day from the time she awoke, which was not 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock was starting time for meetings, until a little after noon,
So at 7 in the morning, you might see something like this.
Gene here, commissioners, Gene Ford here. I think it's time to have a library in this county. Can you get it done? When? By the end of the day? State Park. Hello, Gene here. Time to get rolling on Red Rock Park. Okay, can I count on that being done by Friday? Okay, good job.
You have to check your email now?
Twittering.
Twittering. Well, that was the beginning of Jean's public life. Goodness knows she'd been very busy at home with Carla and Jan, but it was time to go public. Let's see what she's working on now. I think it's 8 o'clock.
Oh, it's getting late. What should I do next? Whoa, no.
Oh, can you hear him now?
Can you hear me? Something happened to my satellite.
This is where we improv.
Oh, Sally, fix my satellite.
There we go.
Oh, I've got communication again. Oh, it's getting late, 8 o'clock. What should I do next? Maybe I'll run for the assembly. On what platform? Being a woman, for one. Abortion, another. I've won. Great! Onward and northward to Carson City. What to work on? ERA, compromise and negotiations, assembly committee assignments, reform the entire legislature. Too much to do, too little time. Oops, lost that Senate race. Maybe I'll go back to school. I've got to check my email.
Well, we can see that ever-advancing technology has enabled Jean to do even more than she could when we knew her. It's now 9 a.m.
9 a.m. and I'm not even started. Darn, this phone isn't working. It needs charging.
I'll hold that for you.
Let's see. There's another one here someplace. Oh, here it is. Now. Gloria, Jean here. Can you keynote next week? Good job. See you then. This ERA amendment is going to be tough. Houston, Jean here. I'll need a hotel reservation, a ticket to the National Women's Conference. Oh, it's getting late. Need to change parties. What's it going to be like being a Democrat? Hello, Jean here. Need one seat in the Senate. Jean Ford. That's Ford.
Do you need to change phones?
Another one's ringing. My God. Oh, darn. This morning's racing away. What to do next? Sagebrush Rebellion, National Parks, Futures Commission. Time to check my Twitter.
Jean kept on moving forward, trying on roles, keeping them or discarding them as she deemed appropriate or timely. We now meet her at 11 a.m.
These phones.
Anything I can hold there?
I hope. Oh, lots of things to work on. Jean here, as interim director, can you help me get a job? I'm not sure I want to do this tourism thing anymore. I'd like to be at the university. Thanks. By tomorrow? Good. Oh, lots of things to work on now. Jean here. As the interim director of women's studies at UNR, I'd like to do a number of things. Got a pencil? Okay, good. National issues forums, teaching classes, leadership development at Rutgers, Nevada Women on the Frontier, Nevada Women's Archives, oral history, research on women on the Comstock in public life. Oh, hello, Jean here. We need to start a women's history project, just like the national one in California. I think if we're quick about it, we can do the following. Book assignment project, bibliography and biographies on the web, teacher training workshops, a trip to the Bancroft Library to peruse primary sources would be fun. Jean here. What? You're asleep? What is that? I've got an idea for a cowboy poetry gathering. We could do that in Elko. But before that, let's get working on the Tahoe Rim Trail. Haven't done anything for that project yet. Oh, it's noon. It's time to check my tweets.
Okay, as Jean works through yet another lunch, how many of you have worked through a lunch with Jean? Yeah. One lunch. And we can pause a moment to breathe. Now, do any of you remember when we would cringe if we saw a caller ID said Jean Ford? Because we knew it meant at least 6 months working on some project we didn't even know about yet, right? We knew when we heard that famous or infamous
Jean here.
We were in for a long project. How she could work so hard, we really couldn't understand. But work she did, and by golly, she accomplished more than most of us in her lifetime. Wait, I see that Jean's ready to go back to work. I think she has one more call to make.
White House, Jean here. Barack, Jean here, about that oil spill.
We have a lot of telephones to return. We're not sure to whom they go, but we can get them back to their owner.
Oh, thank you, Sally and Wally. It's fun remembering all of those things. We've had a lovely time here today. At least I have. And what?
There was another Jean here. You have a movers and shakers of females in our community, in our state, sitting in this house. And have you gotten their names, addresses, phone numbers, emails, and way to reach them?
Of course I have.
I hope so.
Because Isabel is in charge. And
did you tell them that just in case they had some spare change, not to give the Women's Project, but above and beyond, the Wooster High School has theater seats in our northern Nevada community. There was Reno High, and there was...
Gentlemen, that is Peggy Lear Bowen, who was as you can tell, a student of Jean Ford. never miss an opportunity. Anyway, thank you so much, Isabel. Isabel Espinoza was in charge of this pink tea here today. And Isabel, I'd like you to stand up and come up here, please. Yes, absolutely. Because Isabel was also ably trained by Jean Ford. And that's why we had such a wonderful event here today. Thank you, Isabel, for everything that you've done.
Everyone.
And thank you, everyone, for coming and for sharing this tribute to Jean with us. All right. Thank you for coming.